our lives with a shrug of shoulders. I say nobody has a right to kill anybody. Let the ethic transcend the color factor. And the reason why you only have 25 executions out of 25,000 is that by and large the ethnic killings, the poverty-driven, drug-driven killings tend not to get capital punishment. They get the short term.
You didn't answer my question at all.
No, that's all right. He answered it to his satisfaction, and that's the end of it. Next.
Okay, my name's Tom Pauper, and this is for Judge Markman and his colleague. Something to do with the last question, purely unintentional, because I couldn't know what kind of questions are being asked. Judge Markman, and your colleague can ask this too, knowing as you do that the great majority of people put to death or sentenced to death in this country, almost everyone that's put to death or sentenced to death in this country are black, Hispanic, or poor whites. Knowing this as you do, how can you possibly favor the death penalty when practically the only people who will be executed or sentenced to death will be those blacks, Hispanics, or poor whites?
Okay. Sir.
Well, I thought I'd made the point, apparently not very articulately, that in fact the evidence is inconsistent with the premises of your question. And 56% of the individuals who've been executed since the restoration of capital punishment in 1977 are in fact white, a disproportionately high percentage. With respect to the racial argument further, let me say I'm not very impressed one way or the other with the statistics except to refute the premise of your question. Equality is one thing, justice is another thing. Justice doesn't involve letting this burglar go because some other burglar has gone. If in fact there is any disparity in treatment between whites and blacks, that ought to be addressed. That's not the same thing as saying that a fair and equitable and proportionate punishment like the death penalty should be abolished.
Sir.
My name's Al. My name's Alex Abrams, and this question is for the Reverend Jackson. In making your argument about deterrence, you alluded to a shooting that took place in this city less than 36 hours ago, and you said that the officer in question who shot a young man wasn't deterred by the death penalty. I took that to be that you were implying that this officer, Anthony Pellegrini, had in fact committed murder. As far as I know, the facts of the case have hardly been brought out. A grand jury hasn't even been convened, and the mayor of the city of New York says he doesn't know yet what happened. Could you just say for the record now, are you stating that Anthony Pellegrini, police officer in New York, is a murderer?
Coroner's report was the coroner's report was he was shot in the back.
Can you tell me where you know that from? Coroner's report.
If you want to further pursue it. I'm telling you what the case is. He was shot in the back.
That's his answer, and we're going to the next questioner. Go ahead.
My name is Wayne Garrity, and I've read that it's actually cheaper to incarcerate...
Must I say? And even if we're not in the back, with mace and gas, there are many ways to disarm one without a gun than to shoot him down, even if we're in the chest. And my point is, civilians don't have the right to kill police. We need police. Police don't have the right to shoot civilians. And it's almost never do they pay the price for such killings. It has to stop. I'm urging for the killing, the shooting to stop. White, black, black, white, black, black, police. Let's stop the killing. Let's break the cycle.
Okay. Sir.
Yes. Actually, this question is for all four panelists.
No. One question, one panelist.
Well...
Who do you want to pose it to?
Anyone who would care to answer this.
No.
All right, well, I'd like to ask Stephen Markman.
Okay.
I've read that it's actually cheaper to incarcerate a prisoner for 40 or 50 years than it is to execute that same prisoner. And that from a dollar and cents point of view, from the taxpayer viewpoint, it actually saves money to put people in prison rather than to execute them. Is that correct?
Well, just as the issue of deterrence is apparently irrelevant to my colleagues since they haven't answered my question, whether or not proof of deterrence would cause them to rethink their position. I am also unimpressed and find irrelevant the issue of the cost of these respective penalties. I think it's far more important to do justice as the people understand it. That is the function of a criminal justice system, to express the will of the people in responding to criminal activities. And further, this argument reminds me of the old adage about the orphan who shot the child who shot his parents, seeking the mercy of the court, given the fact that the costs of the capital punishment system are as substantial as they are only because capital punishment attorneys have been successful in postponing the execution 9, 10, 11, 12 years on the average.
But that does not answer the question.
There's no cross dialogue here. Let me also say this. We're not going to be able to reach everybody in line because following this, that each side will have a 4-minute closing, and then you are all invited at your own expense to the Century Cafe, which is directly across the street. The only expense there is dependent on how much you drink. Now, next, I'm going to take 2 more on each side, and then we'll go to the closings. Go ahead.
My name is Irene Spivak, and I ask this of Reverend Jackson. As a reverend, I'm asking this. Your colleague, Mr. Hitchens, said that he is absolutely opposed to human sacrifice of any kind, and that it would be appalling to the eye and the nose. He was mentioning some graphic pictures of killing and taking a life, and that perhaps we try to murder our victims, or the death penalty is a cheaper solution. And you said to the gentleman just before me that there are many other solutions than killing. I still do not know how it is, therefore, that as a minister, as a man of the cloth, you endorse the taking of a human life when there are so many other alternatives, such as adoption.
We're not.
How is this? Doesn't this contradict
We're not going to have a discussion on abortion. That's been covered.
I wanted to know how it
I understand that. So I'm not. He's answered that. He has answered that. You may not like his answer. You may not like his answer, but he has answered it. And we will now. Did you want to answer?
I don't want her to feel cheated. I mean, the point is, I believe that unless there are morally, medically extenuating circumstances, the woman is treading on very thin ice. But it's her choice, and she must live with those consequences. And that woman's choices are far more private than the state premeditating a murder. And you should not keep making that comparison, in my judgment.
Okay. Next.
My name is Eli Pariser. I have a question for the National Review. I was wondering if you could speak to whether a life has a price, who can decide that, and what it's worth.
You've answered it.
Answer again.
You've spoken so eloquently. Do it again.
They're arguing.
Okay.
I'm not sure I understand the question. Could you repeat it, please?
Who can decide how much a life is worth in terms of being able to sacrifice it, except for perhaps the person who lives that life?
Well, I'm not sure still I understand the question, but government has as its first responsibility the protection of our domestic tranquility. This is in the preface of our Constitution. This is the reason that governments are created in the first place, to protect each of us from domestic and foreign predators. The death penalty is one of the variety of sanctions adopted by the government in an effort to try to protect us. This is consistent with the will of the people. This is consistent with what the states have done historically. This is consistent with our Constitution. This is consistent with the founding